Welcome back. Today we are going to take a look at the DUNU DK3001BD, also known as the Brain Dance, and perhaps I will refer to it as the Brain Dance. We'll see how it goes. But this one is a little bit pricey. It's about $499, so you can kind of expect a really nice complement of accessories. DUNU tends to do really nice accessories. The Brain Dance is no different. So tip-wise, you've got one set of silicone here, one set of silicone here, one set of silicone here, and this is the S&S. This is the small S&S, but these are the DUNU S&S tips, which are very popular. So again, it's kind of nice to get a full set of those along with the other tips. And back here, there's actually a set of phone tips as well. On the cable, if you are following DUNU, some of their recent cables, the Lyre cable, the Titan S2 cable, they kind of have been using this style of, I call it half and half. So the bottom half is sleeved, that you can see in the gray. The top is not sleeved. It's kind of traditional insulation and braided in that way. But, very nice. Again, this one is using DUNU's modular system. So this is the 4.4, but they include a 3.5 in the package as well. And you also get this leather strap to hold it all together. You also get this white case, this white leather case. You also get the little pouch, the drawstring pouch. So again, as you expect, lots and lots of accessories with this one. So this is what the shell looks like, and it is kind of a matte white. It's actually very cool. I guess it's a cyberpunk theme, I think, is what they were really going for. This one is the MMCX version. Originally, they told me there was going to be a 2-pin and an MMCX version, but the MMCX version was available earlier, so that's why I have the MMCX, but I believe that the 2-pin should be available as well. But yeah, it's a very nice shell. I mean, it feels kind of solid in your hand. It looks kind of cool. It looks a little bit different. I think when DUNU first posted pictures of it, you kind of look at it and you're like, well, does it look expensive or does it look kind of budget? And it's kind of, when you hold it in your hands, it actually feels more solid. It could have been a plastic white shell that a budget set would have done, and it has that kind of look. But to hold it done, in this way, it's actually a very nice, solid feeling shell. So yeah, no issues with the shell or the fit or any of those things. So let's kind of jump into it, and we'll kind of start at the top. So what is inside this guy? It is kind of a tall shell. It's got a little bit of height to it. So what's on the inside? There's a bio diaphragm dynamic driver. There are 4 balanced armatures, 2 for the mids, 2 for the highs. There are 4 microplanars. So there are about 9 drivers in total inside of each one of these shells. So yeah, you can kind of expect that kind of configuration is going to have a little bit of size to it. And I wouldn't say that this is any bigger or less than what people are going to expect or assume it's going to be just a little bit bigger because of the complement of drivers that are inside of it. So is it good? And I would say yes. Kind of right off the bat, it is a very, very nice set. It is a trifecta of great drivers, tuning, and price. And you say to yourself, even at $500, it's still a really great set. And I would say yes. Even at that price, I think it is a great set. It's easily one of the best sets of 2024. And we'll get into a lot of the reasons why. I'll talk about that. And maybe we'll start right there. So there's been a few sets, as we get into number 3, there's been a few sets in 2024 that have used microplanars. Some have been successful, some have not been successful. And I'll say yes, this one is clearly one of the best executions on microplanars. You get clear and solid sound right out to the edge of your hearing, as it should be. It should sound like an extension of the balanced armatures. There should be a really quiet clarity in air, and also seamlessly add resolve to the mids. And that's exactly what this microplanar does. It shouldn't actually sound like a balanced armature. It should sound a little bit like a very extended balanced armature, and that's kind of where this goes. And there should be a quiet clarity. That's a really hard one to say. A quiet clarity to it in the air region. So some balanced armatures, some dynamic drivers, they tend to, especially in 2024, they were throwing in a heavy boost around that, 13, 15K. Throwing a whole lot of bump out there, and that created a very noisy sound at the edge of treble. And people are pointing to it and say, well, look how extended it is, and that sounds all great. But when you hear a set like this that does quiet clarity and it's so solid out to the edge, it sounds very, very different than what a lot of the other hybrids did and how they tried to kind of promote this very resolving, very extended sound by doing a super, ultra high treble boost. It looks good on paper. It didn't really all sound that good. And again, this is sort of where the microplanars are really, really solid. And that's also where planars are really good at. So not all that surprising that, you know, a really good execution of microplanar should take on some of the full-size planar attributes. That's exactly what this one does. But on this set in particular, you also hear a lot of the adding resolve to the mids. The mids are super resolving, and I think a lot of it is the balanced armatures that they chose and this microplanar that they chose. So is it a little bit of a treble show-off? And I will say yes. I think there is a little bit of extra there to differentiate it from hybrid sets. Like I said, I think some of the hybrids, they really try to bump the upper air treble just to make them sound a little bit more extended, a little bit more resolving. And, you know, if you take a set like Variations, that has ESTs, but very, very, really extended, very solid treble. And these microplanars are about as close to Variations in treble as you're going to find. And, you know, just by leaving them a little bit higher in level, having them show off their extension and how solid and clear they can be out to treble extension in air. So yeah, I do think that DUNU showed off a little bit and said, you know, we know we have really nice drivers. We know it's tuned really well. We're going to show you how well it is. And at the same time, we're going to kind of separate ourselves from some of the hybrids of 2024. And that's exactly what this one did. So is it better than Dusk? And Dusk would have been my second choice, another very much a top set of 2024, but it is the other set that really got the implementation of microplanars down. Really, really nice execution on those microplanars. And again, it shows the same kind of capabilities on microplanars, this extension of the balanced armatures that Dusk used. Very, very nice treble on Dusk. So I would say these two sets, if you already have Dusk and you're enjoying it, you know, this is more of a side grade. The two are technically very, very close because they're very similar driver configuration as well. But what I'll say about Dusk is, so out of the box, Dusk, you're either using the analog cable, which has one tuning, or you're using the USB cable, and that has another tuning. And I will say that what I tended to do with Dusk was to EQ it, and my EQ kind of maybe more resembled Braindance than it did either of Dusk analog or Dusk the USB cable. So for me, I would say if you just want one set that is, you know, out of the box, ready to go, I sort of say Braindance is that set. If you're willing to kind of get in there and push the boundaries and in EQ of what Dusk can do, that dynamic driver, that dual dynamic driver on Dusk is really solid. You can actually push quite a bit of bass to it, and it's a kind of a different style than the bass that you're going to get on Braindance. So I think if you're willing to put in the work, I think Dusk will take you further. If you just want something, you know, if you just want something that works out of the box and it sounds amazing, that's probably closer to Braindance. But I will say that once you EQ Dusk and listen to Braindance, both of them are really, really fantastic sets. And for the same reason, because they both have the trifecta of drivers and tuning, and price is a little bit better on Dusk. But yeah, I mean, these are as close as you are going to get to Variations and treble without ESTs. I think both of them do a brilliant job at that characterization. So sound on this one, I will call it U-shape, but it really end-to-end, it sounds slightly lifted, so you can hear everything equally. The tuning is yeah, there's a lot of finesse to what they did on the levels, so you can hear everything end-to-end, very resolving, very clear. There sort of there had to be this mission statement of end-to-end, this one has to have a sound that sounds very crisp, very clear, very resolving, in a way that is different than other sets and even different than Dusk. And so, yeah, it sort of looks on paper, and we'll kind of take a quick look at it. I think the tuning looks very similar to lots of other sets, and I think if you graph them on against other sets, it probably looks very similar. But there was a lot of finesse in the drivers that they chose, the levels that they chose, the little bump here. You know, this is about 5 or 6 dB. It's probably about 6 dB. And then this drop off here for the microplanar. Just a lot of finesse on levels to make sure that everything was clearly heard all the way from the end and sub bass all the way through upper treble and air. You know, very, very much a thoughtful tuning on what drivers they chose, how they sound best in this arrangement. So, yeah, you can kind of poke at the graphs and the numbers and point things out or call it a U-shape. But really there was kind of this end-to-end sound to it that they achieved with Braindance that it is, I would call it a very top-of-the-line sound for the price. Generally, it's going to sound very clean, very clear, more resolving than sets with the same tuning at lower prices. Like I said, lots of sets probably look similar on the graph. They're not going to be as resolving, even if the tuning looks the same. The drivers that they chose are very, very nice. And again, I would say the same thing about Dusk, and I said the same thing about Dusk in that review. Those drivers that they chose, those are just not off-the-shelf drivers that you were seeing at $200 hybrids. Those are very custom Moondrop drivers. These are very custom DUNU drivers, and DUNU is very good at driver development if you followed what they've done over the past few years. So volume scaling, is this one that you're going to end up turning up or turning down? This one really only goes one way. It sounds better the more you turn it up. Keep turning it up and it gets better and better. I wasn't a huge fan of it at lower volume at all. I think it definitely, everything falls in place. It scales up very high. It doesn't have a whole lot of peakiness. There's kind of none of that. There's nothing to the tuning that is really out of place. So the more you can turn it up, the better it will sound. And it definitely sounds a lot better if you can give it more volume. So you low volume listeners, I think Dusk was actually a better lower volume set. This one is definitely one that you're going to want to turn up. So the bass, again, I think DUNU brought out the big boy dynamic driver on this one. I think it is the one from Glacier, or based on the one from Glacier. It is one that is tight and impactful and hits a very satisfying level, but maintains great control. It is almost immediately noticeable what it brings to the table and how seamlessly it fits with the other drivers. Right? The other drivers are going, like I said, it's going to have this faster, cleaner sound to it, and they picked a dynamic driver that perfectly fits in with that sound. Very high quality bass, as you should get at $500. Again, very thoughtful driver selection. And I would say just generally the bass is going to be lighter in density. In 2024, we had a couple sets. I would say like T Pro is one that had a heavier bass density. It was kind of a more kind of bassy sound to it. And then you got Dusk, which was tuned a little bit lighter, but if you EQ'd it, you can actually add a little bit more density to it and make it hit a little bit harder, have a more tactile feel to it. This one is tuned definitely on a lighter density side, and I would say the magic to how they tuned it is really the airiness of the bass to the openness of the mids, and it still sounds full. It's it's like I said, it's a top set of 2024. There isn't really any other set that pulled off this sub bass heavy sound, but it didn't sound lacking through the mid bass, and it doesn't sound too lean. It doesn't sound too thin. There's a lot of magic there in how they match the dynamic driver to the mids and the balanced armatures, and it's kind of hard to put into words, but I think, and we'll talk a little bit about it right now. So the mid bass dip looks a little bit too lean, is it? And again, so I'm just kind of talking about this dip right here, right? This kind of dips down pretty hard. You can see it dips down pretty hard on DUNU's graph. And typically that gives you a very lean sound. You end up with a lot of sub bass out here. And then when you get into male vocals, lower mids, you tend to get this very lean sound. And that kind of carries over if you have planars out here that are a little bit brighter. You get a lean and then a brighter. And then some people push a lot of energy right there in the ear gain. You end up with a very lean, kind of a thin sound. And that's not what happens here. And again, I would say that this dynamic driver is a little bit deceptive on what is actually happening. So you do have a lot of sub bass. It will drop down, so you have some separation there. But the way they did the bass with the balanced armatures. So think about these balanced armatures not like some of these sets that we've heard in 2024. They call them custom, right? Custom balanced armatures, and they sound kind of dry. They sound kind of thin. That's not what these are. These are closer to Sonian style. They're not Sonians, because they probably would have said they were Sonians, but they have that more of that fullness to it, that refinement to it. So even though there is a dip here, and this kind of carries over, there still is less of a gap than you think there is, because this is kind of a nice shelf, but then you're getting some extra fullness from the mids, and these are kind of bumped up just a little bit between like 300 and 500. There's a little bit of boost there. So this combination of the balanced armature that they chose, which have a little fuller sound, this dynamic driver, which sounds good. So while I will fully admit when I first saw the graph, I'm like, I don't like that dip. It's not going to sound good. It's going to be so lean and so thin. It actually doesn't come across that way. And again, a lot of the finesse is probably the driver that they chose, this little bump here, just some really small things that they did to really connect the bass into a seamless mid and have it sound really, really nice. And again, you get this combination of there's a nice seamless transition right into the mids, and then how the mids are so revealing and so resolving. The whole thing just works really, really well. Better than, you know, almost any other set that I've heard in 2024. And it's hard to look at it in the graph and say, I kind of see what you're talking about. But yeah, in ear, this is a kind of a complex set to listen to and figure out what was going on. And I'll say it's kind of this bit, right? So when I looked at the graph, I was really expecting kind of these sterile lower mids. That dip is pretty hard. They said they were using custom balanced armatures. You're not really sure if those are going to be very dry sounding balanced armatures, very analytical style balanced armatures. You know, this could have been a very sterile sounding, very analytical style set, but it is not because of the balanced armatures that they chose. They're not that style. The tuning isn't that style. Yes, it is super resolving, but not really in that sterile style. And again, this little bump between 3 and 500, I typically talk about that in the after show. That is a really quick way to add a little bit body to your mids, exactly what they do here. So again, little bump, add a little bit more body, balanced armatures, the ones that they chose have a little bit more body. You know, everything just kind of works together. And again, I will say very, very thoughtful choice of dynamic driver and balanced armatures and how the two were going to work together. But on the mids, again, all three parts are equally good here, but the tuning does shine a little bit of a spotlight on the mids. It's very resolving, very revealing, very transparent. One of those sets where every breath, every in and out is there. It's not your brain filling it in. So lots of the hybrids that we've had in 2024, you know, people said they were super detailed, super resolution, super micro details, and all those things are sort of true. But like when you get down to listening to, you know, Adele's breath, or as someone is about to start speaking, and that little beginning part to the words that they're about to sing, or how they trail off their words, how the notes hit and how the notes decay, you know, all those things, very much audible, very much present, very much easy to hear on a very resolving set like this one. And I'll say, you know, a lot of the sets from 2024 did an okay job with that. Probably none of them do as well of a job at that kind of resolve as this one does, because the tuning kind of leaned right into it, right? It's very much a lighter bass density. You're not going to have the bass obscuring any of the mids. You still have that bottom end to the mid, so even your lower details, all of your decays, those are also going to be there. The mids are a little bit fuller. And then, you know, a microplanar on top of that, you know, adding all the harmonics on top of it, that sharpness, you know, everything was sort of aligned perfectly for this one to do this style of mids. And they really leaned into it. It's a really, really nice execution of the mids. It really hits that right balance of technical, but doesn't lose musical. Like I said, it's not very super analytical. It's got a really nice musical touch to it. It has a very engaging touch to it. It will pull you into other genres more than the bass says should work. And again, I sort of hate to keep hammering on. When I first saw the graph, I'm like, you know, no way is this one going to do rock. It's probably not going to do EDM, even though it is a pretty heavy sub-bass set. This whole dip was going to sound too lean, too empty. But when you hear it actually executed on these drivers and the way they did it, it will pull you there. It may not be your favorite set for rock and hip-hop and EDM, but you know, as an everyday carry set, one that does some things better than any other set at the price point, and you know, the trade-off is, well, hip-hop may not be perfect or EDM may not be perfect. It's really, really good. You just don't get the heavy bass density that you would get on some other sets, maybe like a T Pro, but you know, that didn't bother me. It's surprising how capable this tuning was on multiple genres than compared to how it looked and what my assumption was going to be when I first saw it. I'm like, this is just never going to work. But I think, like I said, lots of sets do micro details. Few sets have the end-to-end detail and focus like this one. Really high quality balanced armature, plus the microplanars should be this kind of wow moment on every sets that use this combination. And that really hasn't been the case in 2024. Like I said, Dusk pretty much gets there. This set certainly gets there, but I think other ones were kind of, you know, part of the way there or not there at all. But At the same time, I'll say there is a slight all the mids case here. If you push the volume hard, some tracks might be a little bit too much, may sound a little bit less forgiving with forward mixes. Again, it sort of shines the spotlight on the mids. They're pushed a slightly bit forward. So if you have a forward mix track, it'll sort of, you kind of double down, especially if you push the volume hard. But again, I think some of the best sets that do some of the best mids, that do very resolving, very revealing, very transparent mids, I think all of them tend to have the same problem. If you can, because they volume scale so high, you tend to push them higher than you probably should. And then you just kind of realize that, oh, my volume is way too high, and you have to back down on one track. But then on the next track, you kind of go back up to where it was. So I will say that this set is no different, along with lots of really, really nice sets that all have the same problem of you're just hearing the mix in such a revealing way at really high resolution that, you know, a lot of it comes down to the specific mix of that track as opposed to the tuning on the set. It's just simply revealing what is there in the music. So the treble, again, I will say 30 seconds of spending time with the brain dance, you realize how far most sets were in 2024. How far some of those hybrids that we heard in 2024 are really far from smooth and extended treble. And every set, you know, seems to earn the smooth and extended treble because they look at the graph and like, oh, it looks super extended, it's nice and smooth. But on this one, again, the microplanars, the balanced armatures, no grain, no grittiness, no crunch, no crispiness, just laser sharp and consistent out to the horizon. And same thing, while it's a microplanar, it still needs to sit a bit lower in level to avoid all the planar timbre problems and to take advantage of the planar tech capabilities, which is what you have here. Again, this is another one of these finesse bits that they did that you look at the graph and you're like, it kind of looks like everything else. So kind of right where you get about 10K. So 10K, again, should be about 5 dB, about below your mids. By the time you're getting into this upper treble, you don't want a lot of this boosted. You just want to have a natural, hear everything, beautiful extension, seamless extension from your lower treble all the way through. And a lot of that happens when you dip 10K down about 5 dB below your midpoint over here, which is kind of below the solid line. But this also leans into where planars sound best. Why have we consistently seen planar drivers and planar sets, you know, move down in treble level since from Timeless all the way through, you know, S12 2024? Why has this level consistently been pulled down? Because you get less planar timbre, and it's a trade-off between planar techs, you know, being audible and easily audible and sounding beautiful, and having a treble that doesn't introduce timbre problems. So S12 2024 kind of hit a beautiful level, and we're kind of seeing the same exact thing. You know, this whole bit from about 10K down has been cut a little bit, and you still get great extension, but that level is going to sit a little bit lower just so you don't get those artifacts that you get on other sets where the treble sounds a little bit wonky, or there's a timbre problem, or it's not adding the proper amount of resolve to the mids. You know, this was very intentional, very thoughtful. It's the exact right thing to do on this particular driver where it was going to sound the most natural, and they kind of nailed that bit. So stage, again, this is another bit. It's all there. It's got width and height and depth. There's a ton of dark space. Again, this bass isn't super dense. You don't have a whole lot of bass clouding your stage. Ton of dark space around the instruments. Everything pops. Everything is super vivid. And I would say it's the fourth part of the trifecta, right? I didn't mention it up here, but the fourth part is the imaging and the layering and, you know, the separation. All those things are kind of top notch on these drivers, on this tuning, as you expect. Very clean, very clear, super high quality drivers. All those things were going to pop, and it's exactly what they do here. And I would say it just magnifies the other great parts of the set. You can certainly say the bass is great and the mids are great and the treble's great, but when you hear it all in your head and it's nice and localized and imaged and, you know, everything has beautiful separation and layering, it takes it kind of to the next level of exactly where you were, you know, hoped that your top of the line sound would come from. And that's exactly what it does here on Braindance. So that is what I got on the Braindance. So thank you guys for sitting through that one. It was a bit long, but worth it on a set that does a lot of things right. So thank you guys again for sticking with it and tuning in, and I'll see you next time.